welcome to today's episode of Hyper Live. Got a very special guest today, all the way from the US. Welcome, Carol Huule, CEO and founder of Inspire Digital Consulting, and my co-host, as usual, Daniel, joining us today. And today's topic is how do we retain or maintain a connection between AI and humans, rather than the notion of replacing people in the workforce, but actually thinking about how do we make life better for people by using AI in positive ways. So maybe I'll pass over to you, Carol, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then come back to Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. Great to talk as always. Inspired Digital Consulting was created for the purpose of really practicing a client love strategy, meaning that our focus as a consulting organization is much more on how we help clients be successful, and whether that involves helping to build digital leaders, right, who can thrive and who lead teams in a new and different way, or helping teams, kind of cross-functional teams from business and technology, operate in a way where they can deliver value quickly together. And then also, and last but not least, is helping clients to create new digital products or value innovate existing digital products. And our method has, from the beginning, been focused on having AI integrated into how we deliver, putting humans at the center, and helping clients harness the power of their own people. So we're very passionate about enabling people in our work.
Fantastic. And maybe Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself as well, and then we can dig into some of the topic.
Hi everyone. Daniel Walters, founder of Great CTO. Also do a bunch of work with Gareth and the team. And I coach CTOs. I do consulting work and fractional CTO work. But I have a lot in common with Carol, just listening to the description of the work that Inspire do. So a lot of the work we do with CTOs is helping broaden those horizons and find that connectivity across the organization. So that resonates. Now, before we kick into the episode, this is a pre-recorded, so it'll be premiered live on YouTube, but we will be there in the comments, so have your comments coming through. Being a pre-recorded video, we'll respond to them in the chat rather than on air. So really looking forward to all of your contributions and your questions as well. So just maybe kicking into it, Carol, in the sort of work that you do with your clients, what are some of the things that you're seeing? What are some of the challenges that they're grappling with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think initially the challenges were, getting through some of the hurdles from legal, HR, security, to go in the direction of leveraging generative AI. I mean, most companies have had AI for years, but now that we're in this place where we're shifting to focus on more powerful capabilities, agentic AI, kind of on the horizon. There's a lot of organizations that I would say were kind of running with scissors, right? So they were putting things out there in a method that was not secure, testing things out, but not really understanding the ramifications of what they were doing. And then there's the other extreme of clients that were really kind of very, very, very slow to act. Being very concerned and kind of focused on ticking and tying all of the right things that they needed to in order to make sure that it was safe. And I think interestingly, it didn't necessarily all have to do with regulated industries versus non-regulated. I think, typically it was more of the level of maturity of the data organization, and the level of sophistication of the CTO and their support team. But Gareth, I'm not sure what you've been seeing, if there are
Yeah, it's
different.
fascinating. I think we're seeing the same thing in Australasia, so New Zealand and Australia from the clients we work with. I think there's people are playing with these ideas. They're looking for ways. I think that the conversations are absolutely happening at the exec and board levels, but they're looking for ways to bring these ideas into their business. So the easiest ones are looking for third-party solutions that have AI that can fit into the existing products and services that they have. That's a nice, reasonably safe option. There's still things like privacy concerns, etc. They've got to be careful about, and data sovereignty, etc. But then I think the harder one is probably creating your own products as an organization with AI, and that requires some really good product management kind of practices, and then also bring it in to your own processes in terms of if you use software, which most organizations do, using it to deliver software better. And I think we're seeing organizations playing with things, but there's definitely anti-patterns in terms of, maybe biting off a little bit more than they can chew to start with as well.
Yeah, and you brought up a thought that prompted in my mind is that this generation of AI and technologies surrounding generative and agentic, it's quicker to highlight where there were fundamental flaws in the foundation and the basics, right? You mentioned organizations trying to leverage AI, generative AI, and software delivery. Well, if you already don't fundamentally have good practices, then we're going to know it pretty quickly, right? Because you can create a lot of technical debt and a lot of poor code quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Versus those organizations that already have the fundamentals pretty solid.
Yeah, totally agree. And in fact, I think we may see some of the practices that perhaps lack a little bit of maturity in some organizations, but coming back to the forefront just because we shift the way we work to more validation of before we start writing code, and then the validation once we've got to have some deterministic way of testing whether what we've done is actually working as well from a governance perspective.
Yeah, and is it maintainable, right? Like if you have AI actually create the code, but you haven't given it the instruction to specifically, document its logic in a way that could be supported for 2 years in terms of changes from a human, you're going
Yeah.
to get into a situation where it's almost impossible to maintain the code.
Mm. There's a lot of fear, I think, as
It's
well,
really
sort of creeping in. In terms of people worried about losing their jobs. What's your view in terms of how do we? Is that a real fear, and what do organisations need to do, especially leaders, to help people make this change?
Hmm. Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I think the hype cycle has not helped with the fear. People change for very personal reasons, right? And I think depending on the target audience for leveraging AI, you really have to try to look at the world through the lens of what job are they trying to get done, right? To be successful, right, in their job, and what are the things that they're afraid might be taken away. We've had several conversations with clients where the fear of a particular job role going away completely has led to people kind of closing up and really not sharing and not wanting to even participate in the conversation. So I do think that 90% of the change is going to be between the ears, and understanding what's in it in a positive way for people is going to be very important. There's one example I'll share with you. It's a company called TIA. It's an insurance an annuity provider for teachers, right? That's their main client base. And what they did to get rid of the fear, or to try to diminish the fear, is that they actually created like an AI buddy. And they rolled it out to a small number of people in the organization first, and they started to leverage the positive stories from this smaller group of people, in order to reduce the fear for others adopting the new technology. So I really appreciated the way that they kind of framed that transformation and the adoption of it.
So it's sort of leveraging the adoption curve in a way, by working with a smaller group who may be the people who are willing to experiment, and then the social proof that others see that that's not leading to harm for that group.
So how do we create connection for humans using AI and make sure that we still have connection between humans in an organization when we introduce these new technologies?
Mm, yeah, that's a really great question. I just spoke with a client recently in the last 2 weeks about that exact topic, and this is one of the larger, I would say, super regional banks. So they're not a global institution, but they certainly operate in a number of different states. And um, we were talking about how the team that's focused on serving clients directly, and in this case, it was the consumer bank, could actually, as consumer and small business, could use AI so that the bankers who and the financial analysts could actually do a little bit of research on the person that they were working with ahead of time, to understand where that person might be coming from. So if it's a small business owner, understanding where they are in the market, understanding, typical challenges that that small business owner might have. And, this kind of research to really know your customer is something that would have taken a huge amount of time previously. But enabling the frontline consumer and small business bankers with tools that could allow them to know their customer more rapidly, and to make personal connections with that individual. We were talking about how powerful that could be, for that relationship. Because, the more you know your client, the more you understand the problems that they're trying to solve for, the better equipped you're going to be in order to come up with some really creative solutions that would be right on the mark for that client. So that's one example from
Yeah,
us.
that's a great example. And but like you say, I mean, I think it's a great example in the sense of these are just tasks that they're not particularly value-adding tasks in the sense of you just have to do a lot of work to gather that information. But at the heart of it is that connection. If you can accelerate that, then yeah, that means more connections out of the organization. What about internally? I mean, have you seen any kind of examples of how people are using it to at least maintain connection within an organization as AI is introduced?
Yeah, I think one example would be in the product development life cycle, and specifically within IT portfolio management. I think it's one of those situations where traditionally there's a lot of moving pieces, there's a lot of data. The traditional mindset on IT portfolio management was that you'd have these big programs, and within the programs, you'd have projects, and you'd have various development teams, working across these different initiatives. And people come to the work with their own personal bias, right? And the things that they need to get out of the engagement with others. So the executives, right, in the line of business side, They have questions about, when is my new feature going to be released, and what potential value could that have? Will it actually achieve the value that we had hoped? Because, we're spending all this money, to achieve a certain amount of value. Meanwhile, the developer, right, or the product owner, product manager, they come at the same, kind of set of data with a different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prioritization has always been a challenge for organizations, and, the development team trying to figure out, well, what should we prioritize based on, what the business owner is interested in, and based on what the end consumer would actually leverage. And so one of the clients that we're working with is trying to tackle some of those challenges, with the use of AI and generative AI in IT portfolio management, to help with the communication gap, to help with the translation from idea to it's in production, and really to facilitate better understanding between the different stakeholder groups that need to operate effectively together, in order to really make the right decisions about what should be focused on in that IT portfolio.
Do you know why that particular opportunity stood out, Carol?
Well, I
Like,
think,
why did they select that over other ones?
yeah, for them, it's been the biggest pain point, and or one
Hmm.
of their biggest pain points, and they were also kind of, they're going down the path of, upgrading the product suite internally, that they use to manage IT portfolio management, because they were shifting from a project based view of the world and how they operated to a product centric operating model. And it's, from their research and the work that they had done so far, it was going to be a pretty significant investment for them to actually move to adopting a completely different tool set. And so part of the reason for focusing on IT portfolio management was to ask the question of, can we use AI and generative AI so that we actually don't even need to go buy this new suite of tools that we thought we needed, right? Is there a more efficient way to do it? Can we just rethink IT portfolio management instead of just, going along the kind of the traditional thought path? But then I also believe that they were looking to more quickly, translate insight to action. And
Mm.
they also wanted to get out of the business of creating PowerPoints for executives, because with every update that they were doing, every 2 weeks or so, there was a huge amount of effort and work put into, creating the storyline, right? Probably almost as much work in creating the storyline for executives as in creating the code. And so they were trying to find ways to be able to message and communicate, um, the update and what was happening to executives, but at the same time, giving the team the visibility to what needed to happen to go from idea to it's in production, as quickly as possible, but at the same time to prioritize and focus on what's most valuable to the business and to the end consumer. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. Yeah, it's certainly
Mm.
a pattern
Yep.
we see here as well. Often organizations struggle with, especially on bigger pieces of work, bigger initiatives, the trust between, what does our governance structure look like versus our delivery capability? Because we, at exec level or board level, they need to know that things are on track, but often to get that transparency in a form that's understandable and accessible is very, very expensive for the organizations. And I think AI is that especially LLMs are phenomenally good at translation or transformation of data into different structures, right? We see that at the code level, but also and going from one structure to another at any level. So I can imagine how that could work really effectively.
Mm-hmm.
I think another example in terms of bringing people together at a more technical level that we've seen is, there's just more of an emphasis on specification before you build, because you start to generate code, then you need real clarity on the specification. And I think that offers a great opportunity for people with stronger testing skills and development skills, product ownership skills within teams to actually work more carefully together. The value of the specification, the value of the collaboration actually increases, which makes it, it gives you that opportunity to spend more time together and bring those connections together.
Mm-hmm. It's true, and I think it's also helped to not start with a blank piece of paper, right? So, many of the clients that I work with are trying to make that shift, as I mentioned, from project to product. And a big part of that is having objectives and key results that are the North Star and that can then be cascaded down, right, to the value stream aligned teams. And, to your point, leveraging AI and generative AI can help with that, translation layer,
Mm.
and getting people to kind of synthesize, highly complex topics into something that can, clarify, what do we need to do in the next, 2 weeks? Like, what should we really prioritize out of the sea of everything that we could do? What's most important?
It's going to be a really interesting evolution with these tools participating in that flow and process, because you've got what happens at the discovery, or even like the initiation of any initiative, and then how all those conversations evolve, and there's potential for some voices to get disenfranchised. So you can imagine what happens when engineers are able to do a lot of that and then take potentially that idea out to customers or production. Do we still get those good design voices and product voices and all that research flowing into that? So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting space to watch.
Mm, yeah, and I think there's, with any innovation, there's unintended consequences, right? From applying some of this innovation, and it makes me think back to a recent study from our Government Accountability Office. And what they were looking at, this is from 2025, so this is from this year. They found that within financial services, there was AI lending bias, right? That was just built in to the
Mm.
model, built into credit decisions in lending, which I'm not sure about in your part of the world, but here that's illegal, right? Like that's against our banking rules to have that bias built in. And I think that when they were going through the design process, to your point about having the designers, the creators, kind of thinking through what could really happen, what is the kind of the positive path and the negative path from a design standpoint. Should we leverage AI and generative AI, for lending, right? But having the people in the process and really having that critical thinking to determine, is this best? Is this the right thing to do? Could have avoided a lot of challenges in AI lending bias, as one example.
Mm.
Mm.
Do you think that's just it's a point in time, as people understand that AI, it's not deterministic, so it can, and also it's trained on human data sets or potentially data sets with bias for whatever reasons. Is that just an early stage, like we're just learning how to govern better around when we introduce AI? Or I like I think the critical thinking aspect's really important, isn't it? Maybe those are actually the bigger missing skills sometimes.
I think you're right, and it's back to what we said earlier, that AI and generative AI, agentic AI, they're going to magnify uh, what we're already challenged with, right?
Mm.
I Because you can create things much more rapidly, and the things that we're not doing well, right? Whether it's bias built in, we don't have kind of critical thinking into how we're designing things. That is going to be exacerbated, right? Like
Mm.
you're going to see it a lot sooner and a lot faster, with the use of AI and generative AI, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's yes, it's faster, and also it can sort of amplify in the wrong directions without those guardrails, which is yeah, it's going to be some interesting, I think, newsworthy stories over the next few years of people that maybe don't quite anticipate where these things can go. What about
We've
just generally in terms of, if you're giving advice to leaders about bringing in AI in any form in an organization, what are the sort of things that you're saying to them?
Mm. Yeah, I'm saying to start with, your overall objectives and key results from a business standpoint. Like, what are you really trying to achieve? And where do you want to prioritize your effort, right? To really compete in the market. And then my suggestion is, okay, if you want to win with a particular client segment, as an example, let's look at what is the job that client is trying to get done, right? And how do we make that something that is completely frictionless? What are the value streams within your company that touch that end client? And if we look at it from an end-to-end business value stream lens, where can we apply AI smartly, right, to make that end customer's job to be done much more frictionless, in the places that matter for that end client. So I'm always looking at it through the lens of how are you going to improve the results of what you're delivering to your end client in a way that they will value, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Is is there a relationship there? You know, we all come from a background of thinking about organizing systems and organizations around the customer, value streams, so those kind of concepts. Does AI now kind of accelerate that move for organizations? Like, the risk is, I guess, if you're not thinking or not organized around value from a customer's perspective, then you risk having potentially local optimizations in the organization with AI. Is that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that as with any technology, but I think it's especially important with AI, generative AI, agentic AI. Knowing where to apply it, so that you can really get the most leverage and the most improvement, is essential in the whole decision process. I think about one story, one example, and this is in the healthcare um, diagnostic space. There's an organization called Moorfields Eye Hospital, and they had partnered with Google to develop an AI tool that could analyze retinal scans, right, to detect conditions like macular degeneration. And I don't know if you've ever gotten one of these done, but I once a year I get this 3D eye scan,
Mm.
and it's amazing what they can learn from just it's not just macular degeneration, but my eye doctor was saying he can tell if I'm developing diabetes. Like he can tell
mm,
all kinds of other underlying potential health conditions, and the result of this work that they did is that they developed a tool that helped these clinicians achieve faster, more accurate diagnosis, reducing the false positives that from just human eye looking at the image might make. And then they really allowed the doctors to focus more on patient care, right? The relationship with the patient, with the person, instead of, really focusing in on a tiny image on a screen.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's
Yeah, that might.
Oh, sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, my wife is working in healthcare and looking at the applications of AI, so that strongly resonates. And I feel like I need one of these scans. I've been doing a lot of AI coding recently, and I think it's doing a number on my eyes.
You do. They actually can now put some blue light filters directly into contact lenses. So
Mm,
to protect your eyes from these computer screens that we're looking at all day.
mm, definitely necessary. I'm interested. We've been describing this. Almost this spectrum of adoption across the entire episode. So, there's the companies that are rushing in too quickly. There's the companies that are maybe holding back and being too conservative, and that might be leading to things like dark IT and other things where their people are using these tools anyway. So yeah, it's just it must seem almost impossible for leaders to like, well, where should we sit in that spectrum? Should we should be holding back? Should we dipping our toes? So what's some of your advice?
Gareth, did you want to take that first, or did you want me to?
Yeah, look, I think I certainly chip in with a couple of ideas. I think we already have some of these skills, or these bodies of knowledge exist, and so I think just leveraging those. Just don't forget about product management in terms of if you're trying to create or introduce AI into one of your products, then do the research, do the validation before you build. And I think I've always been a huge fan of experiments as a way to introduce change. It culturally, I think, is much easier for people. It gives people a little bit of space to learn. You can build some confidence before you commit, and I think those are great ways to think about the change. But yeah, Carol, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about some of the success patterns, right, from a business and executive standpoint. One of the things, and we've talked about this before, Gareth, that I think is really important is to take a thin slice approach based on what's going to deliver business value. I think across almost every organization I've worked with, uh, their data is not clean and ready and perfect. Like
Mm.
I don't know anybody who's got perfect, clean, ready data that could be used for agentic AI. I just maybe they're out there, but I haven't met them yet. And so, I think the answer is yes, we absolutely should be starting down this journey, because anybody who waits too long, they're going to get so far behind that they're going to become like Kodak, right? They're going to be
Yes.
completely irrelevant. Um, I would say the places to look, right, for where you need to start would be, I would say one would be where you see that there's significant business value that you can deliver, and where there are, I would say, complementary um, roles, right? So where AI can handle, data heavy or repetitive tasks, and the humans, contribute to empathy, ethics, big picture thinking.
Mhm.
Um, the second place that I would say is going to be really really important is for human in the loop design, right? So, uh, a place where AI suggestions are always vetted, refined, contextualized by humans. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients where we started to do an AI search, and whether they were using Claude or ChatGPT or something else, it almost didn't matter. Um, uh, they would ask a question, and when you look at the results that came back, it's like, this is really, really curious. This doesn't make much sense. But it would take a person, right, to be able to take a look at that and say, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. The fourth thing I would say is to build trust through transparency, right? So, systems provide reasoning, right? Helping humans build confidence. But it's important for the system to be able to show its work, right? To be able to explain how it got to where it is, so that you can start over the course of time to really build trust. And then also iterative feedback, right? Both AI and humans learn continuously. And so any kind of, AI system or kind of, path that you take needs to be one where, yes, you set a course, you have certain business value generating use cases that you're going to focus on delivering in quick increments. But you have that fast feedback loop in place. And I'll kind of, close off on this. And this is a quote that someone shared with me, to kind of encapsulate my perspective on making sure that there's, human emotional intelligence. And they said, AI precision and, is important, but so is human nuance, right? And efficiency without empathy is a fast path to irrelevance.
Yeah.
And so, to the question of, where do you start? How do you go? I would requote that, right? Like, if you're just trying to do an efficiency play without empathy, without human empathy built in, it is a fast path to irrelevance.
Yeah.
So
It's a great
people always matter.
Yeah, it's a great quote. I think the other place that we're seeing opportunities is where there are sources of friction in internal processes, because people then they're already feeling a little bit of pain or frustration, or it may be impacting relationships. And if you can show that that's something simple that just makes things a little bit better. I always like to try and think about what are the deterministic sort of checks you put in place around things, just so people can see that yes, it's a generated result if it's a LLM, but it's giving us the result that we know is correct in our context. And then I think you're helping people at the same time as experimenting and introducing the technology.
Mhm.
Daniel, any suggestions from you as well?
Well, what we covered over the course of the episode, so we were talking about what was essentially strategy. So, companies being very in tune to their strategy and what was important for them to win in the market and provide value for their customers. So it's interesting. We see these swings back and forth. I think there was a very slow swing towards outcomes and strategic thinking over the last decade, and then, as the financial markets, sort of crunched, all of a sudden we saw these big swings back to like large projects and away from strategy. But I see as people get familiar with these tools, all of a sudden this swing back of like, hang on, these AI tools are enabling us to actually test things, and we're getting back to this empirical thing. And now they're going, okay, can we point this to important parts of our strategy, and can we compete better using them? So it's just been a fascinating shift back and forth in that space. Obviously, for myself, very passionate about outcome thinking. So yeah, I would start there. Start with the value, and like Carol said, hook in those feedback loops. both on the micro and the macro level, and that will help steer you and make sure you course correct based on those feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think that sort of is a nice place to wrap up today's episode. So thank you so much, Carol. And I know it's later in the day for you, so I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure I'd love to have another episode with you at some stage in the future. But thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Carol.